Is Prime Minister Netanyahu doing enough to stop this violence there from escalating?
There has not been a significant overreaction. The question is how they get to a point where there is a significant reduction in the attacks.
This is about an imbalance of power. The president and many other figures this week stated that Israel has a right to self-defense. But do Palestinians have a right to survive?
President Biden and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez weighing in on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There were new attacks overnight after the president spoke to leaders of both sides about the recent violence, which has left nearly 200 dead, most of them Palestinian. Our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, is on the scene in Israel with the latest. Matt, it looks like you're right in the middle of it.
A rocket exploded about 20 yards from where we're standing right now. The majority of the population of Israel, Martha, has experienced the sirens and the explosions. The family here was having its Sabbath meal. They heard the sirens, managed to sprint to a bomb shelter, but a man across the street was killed. Now, civilians on both sides have borne the brunt of this. Overnight, the fiercest Israeli attack on the Gaza Strip that we've seen so far. Palestinian health officials reporting more than 33 dead, the majority of them women and children. Parts of Gaza today, Martha, look like a moonscape. Dozens of buildings flattened, but one of them in particular drew intense international condemnation against Israel. That tower block you are seeing housed Al Jazeera, the Associated Press, and many other international media agencies. Israel says it was targeting Hamas installations, but it has provided no evidence of that. And perhaps encapsulating the misery that we have seen in Gaza is the story of Mohammed Adid. You can see him right there atop that pile of debris, screaming out, wailing. He was told that he lost his wife and 5 children in that building. But an hour later, he was led into a Gaza hospital, and there was his sole surviving family member, 5-month-old Omar. Now, Israel is telling us that the pace and intensity of rocket attacks is unprecedented. Nearly 3,000 so far, 5 times what it was in the previous conflict. But now we're starting to hear murmurs from the Israeli military that this campaign is not going to be indefinite, that it might only last a few more days. Martha.
We'll keep our eye on that, Matt. Thanks so much for joining us there this morning. And we're back now with more from the roundtable. And Cecilia, let's pick up where Matt Gutman left off. Donald Trump and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, were behind the so-called Abraham Accords between Israel and some Arab neighbors. Donald Trump said that would mean the dawn of a new Middle East, but that certainly has not happened.
Yeah, and this was something that was seen as a huge, at least among Republicans anyway, a huge feather in the cap of Donald Trump when it came to international diplomacy and Middle East issues. The president said that this was the foundation for comprehensive peace potentially in the entire region. You know, it wasn't just the Republicans, though. The Biden administration supported this. Tony Blinken came out and said that this was something he would like to see expanded and have other Arab nations in the regions join. I think a lot of experts are seeing what's happening now, given all the violence, and think the likelihood of more countries joining on to these accords is slim to none. What we're seeing from the Biden administration right now is they are walking this very fine line. They are very much pushing private diplomatic diplomacy. That is their goal right now. But a lot of folks are very critical of the administration, particularly in their own party. You're seeing folks like Bernie Sanders come out and not happy with the president. They would like to see them take a more forceful tone in support of Palestine and the issues that are happening in Gaza right now. But right now, you're seeing a very traditional approach from the Biden administration.
And Mary, if this escalates, and Matt said he thought it might die down in the next few days, he's hearing rumblings of that. But if this escalates, do they have a plan?
They're going to need to come up with something more. I think so far when we've pressed them on this, as Cecilia notes, they've been really pointing to these behind-the-scenes conversations. I mean, look, it's no secret that this was not high on Joe Biden's priority list, right? He made very clear coming into office he was going to focus far more on his domestic agenda when it comes to foreign policy, far more focused on things like competing with China. I mean, the biggest change that we've seen in the early months of this administration has simply been deprioritizing, in many ways, the Middle East. While he was critical, Biden was, of many of Donald Trump's policies, he hasn't taken big steps to reverse a lot of them. And they've had this very muted response this week It's getting them some pushback. The question now is, how long can this really last?
And Rachel, Cecilia alluded to it, but there is this big divide on Capitol Hill on how to approach, especially Israel.
Yeah, and even Senator Bob Menendez, who has been one of the strongest supporters of Israel, came out and said that the killing of Palestinians in the area is deeply troubling. And on the House floor this week, we saw these fiery and really emotional speeches. We played that soundbite from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pushing back against this idea of Israel has the right to defend itself, instead saying that we should be asking ourselves whether Palestinians have the right to survive. And then Rashida Tlaib, this is very personal for her. She is Palestinian. She has family in the area. She says when you read those White House statements and the statements from President Biden and the Secretary of State, it's almost as if the suffering of Palestinians doesn't even exist.
This is something I have covered for 30 years, and it is just the ugliest cycle over and over again. And Pierre, I want to end with you here. Security officials are obviously watching this closely. There have been protests in support largely of the Palestinians. Are officials worried that this could spread?
There's always the potential of spillover effect, and some officials are quietly very concerned that ISIS and or al-Qaeda might try to exploit the situation.
And what do they see now? I mean, ISIS and al-Qaeda, but throughout the region, more protests?
It's really the lone wolf effect, that people who are identified with the Palestinians, for example, will be frustrated, angry, and then they might try to do something here at home.
Okay, thanks so much. It is great to be back together again.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.